And you sports fans say movie fans are crazy. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of The Fan from 1996. So, as I said when I reviewed Hollow Man either last month or a month ago, that I'm going to try pretty regularly, at least once a month, to review a movie that I find to be underrated or a lesser known film, kind of get some eyes on some of those hidden gems. Those are my favorite movies to talk about. And this month, I'm going to talk about The Fan. Now, this is a movie that I never hear anybody talk about. I've seen it numerous times. It is one of my favorite of Tony Scott's films. Just came out on Blu-ray within the last month. Talked about it briefly in my last Off the Shelves, but I was having dinner with my dad the other day, and he bought the same Blu-ray and was talking about how it was so cool to rewatch it. It was a movie that nobody talks about. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Time to change that. So if you're not familiar with this movie, which I'd imagine most of you are not, this is a film with Robert De Niro and Wesley Snipes, where Wesley Snipes is this big up-and-coming baseball star, and Robert De Niro is an absolutely unhinged psychopath that fixates and obsesses over Wesley Snipes and his career, to the point where as his personal life starts to kind of dismantle and devolve, he gets more and more fixated to where he stalks him, he stalks his son, he knows where he lives, he calls him randomly, and eventually starts killing people that is getting in the way of the progress of his baseball career. Didn't do too well at the box office, didn't do too well in the critic ratings. I think it's in like the 30s on Rotten Tomatoes right now, and I understand some of the criticisms hail at the movie. It's not perfect by any means. There's certainly some flaws here, but I've always found it to be very underappreciated. And to be honest, this most recent time that I rewatched it last night, there's a lot that this movie discusses and dives into that is possibly more relevant today than it was in 1996. But really quick before we dive into all of that, if you also have a baseball star that you are fixated on and you're just running a little bit short on funds to get those season tickets behind home plate, then be sure to check out the sponsor of today's video, Dave. We all know what it's like to have financial issues or unexpected expenses come up. If you're a homeowner, own a vehicle, or have kids, you know this very well. Well, everyday situations like these is where Dave can help. Dave is a banking app that could get you up to $500 instantly with Dave's Extra Cash. And with Dave, there's no interest, late fees, or credit checks. So by using Dave, you could fill up your gas tank before your paycheck drops, or go and buy that present for the birthday party that your kids just told you about yesterday. Download Dave today at dave.com/Cody. That's dave.com/Cody. Sign up for an Extra Cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC. And thank you to Dave for sponsoring today's video. Starting off with the positives, you gotta give some props to the two central performances of Robert De Niro and Wesley Snipes. Now, the movie is much more focused on Robert De Niro's character, the villain, and so Wesley Snipes doesn't get as much to do, but what he is here to do, he does really well as this kind of younger, cocky, up-and-coming baseball player. He's got rivalries within the team, he's battling fandom, he's battling criticism, and then eventually is battling an absolute psychopath. And Wesley Snipes is always one of those actors that I've liked, and this is before he really started to hit the big time with the Blade movies, and so I really enjoy his performance here. But Robert De Niro is the standout, and he really plays a good fucking creep.
If you hurt my fucking kid, I swear to God, I'm gonna fucking kill you! Bobby! Be nice, Bob.
And it's weird because there's not really a whole lot of qualities to this character to make you like him. Like, the way that he responds to people, the way that he interacts with people, the way that his relationship goes with his son and his ex-wife, the way that he is just steadily getting creepier and more unhinged as the movie goes on. There's not really any redeeming qualities or sympathetic qualities to him. And yet somehow you still kind of like him. There's like some charm there that Robert De Niro brings, where even just a really creepy conversation that he has with Wesley Snipes where he's trying to let him know what he's been doing kind of behind the scenes to help out his career by asking him specific questions. And every single time Wesley Snipes gives him an answer that he does not want to hear, you just see the facial expressions and the tone drop in his face where he's kind of smiling, waiting for a thank you or a pat on the back, and Wesley Snipes dismisses it and just And I even like the attitude that he brings, because he's kind of an asshole. Like the way that he interacts with everybody in his job, he's very aggressive, and you could see why nobody really buys knives off of him. But even when he's in the baseball stadium, and he's the only person cheering on Wesley Snipes, and everybody else is booing him, he's like, ah, fuck you, shut the fuck up, fuck you!
Come on, Bobby! Fuck you!
He's enjoyable. I don't know why. There's no reason to like this character, but I still like him. Kudos to De Niro. And he does a good job at subtly ratcheting up that psycho quality as the movie goes on, because you can tell there's something a bit off with him in the first act. Throughout the second act, you start to see his life dismantle and the obsession take over a little bit more in an unhealthy way for sure. And then the third act, when people are dying and people are being kidnapped and lives are being threatened, and there's a lot of gnarly shit going on and being threatened by this character, and you absolutely believe that he could do something really sadistic and fucked up. I mean, the way that the third act unfolds at this baseball stadium, the first time you see it, you don't know where things are going, but even just the phone calls that Robert De Niro has with certain characters setting up the third act, you believe that this guy is capable of anything.
Okay. I just want my kid back. Batter up, Bobby. I waited a long time for this. Okay, no, wait.
I also really like the direction and the style from Tony Scott. He was always one of my favorite directors, rest in peace, but there's so many of his best movies where his style is kind of the star of the show. There's a certain pacing to his movies where things are always moving, things are always ratcheting up, and from the way that the editing goes and the transitions and just the stylistic visuals that he goes for, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so much. And it's because of Tony Scott's direction and his style that he brings to this that, for me, this does rise above what could be a very passable, forgettable premise, because we've seen this type of setup before. Psycho, crazy person versus the person that is innocent that they're obsessing over. We've seen that a dozen different ways every single year. And so his energy that he brings that keeps this flowing, that has a little bit of an action flair in there, that has a bit of a style in the way that the movie is paced out, to me, that's what keeps this as a really entertaining movie, despite it being really dark, really heavy, and not having a whole lot of forgiving qualities for these characters that you're spending 90 minutes with. Soundtrack is also awesome, and that kind of feeds into that Tony Scott style. A Tony Stark directed psycho thriller baseball movie. Make that happen, Hollywood. Anyway, the soundtrack is awesome. You got multiple Rolling Stones songs. You got 9 Inch Nails in here that's kind of a variation of one of their songs that's mixed in with the score in a few spots that I think gives a really nice creep factor, kind of emphasis on the scenes that it's predominantly with Robert De Niro. It's like almost his Psycho soundtrack, and I think it works really well. And there's a whole recurring element, especially with the Rolling Stones stuff, to where Robert De Niro is like discussing with somebody about how he remembers when Mick recorded this and talks like about Mick Jagger, as if they were these old friends. And when the movie starts, you don't quite understand how psychotic that is. But as the movie goes on and you keep hearing these songs that we all love and you keep seeing these stories come out from this character, you realize how whacked and how inside of his own fucked up head he really is. And on that note, the thing that I appreciated about this movie the most watching it this time is that all the different themes that they're exploring here about obsession and striving for perfection and putting all of like your validation into somebody else's approval and all the different weird twisted ways that Robert De Niro and Wesley Snipes' relationship are kind of somewhat codependent in a certain way. To me, that was really, really well done here. And it's something that I think is more relevant today, especially when you have things like, what I can really speak on is having an online presence and having an audience and having thoughts that you put out there for everybody to hear. And naturally you get people that like that, people that hate that, people in the middle. And it's nowhere near the level of a $40 million baseball player, but it's similar. Like you have the Wesley Snipes character, people love him and they're cheering him on, they love the fact that he's on the team, and then as soon as he starts to slip up a little bit in his performance, they all turn on him, they all hate him, all the radio shows want to talk about how he's undeserving of this career, and then as soon as he starts hitting again, he's everybody's hero. And Wesley Snipes has a really good scene with Robert De Niro where he's talking about fandom and talking about how you should always do it for yourself because the people are never going to always be there. They only love you when you're on. They hate you when you're off. And you have even Robert De Niro's side of things to where he sees this person with all these opportunities and this $40 million contract, and what he sees is this golden life and doesn't quite appreciate it, doesn't quite appreciate how the fans have contributed to that in a certain way, and they're the ones that get him the $40 million contract. And it's two sides of a coin that I see those conversations happen a lot just with YouTube stuff. And you see it in politics, you see it in movie stars, and of course sports stars to today. And it's just a really interesting way that they explore it, because besides the fact that Robert De Niro is a psycho, and he's definitely doing a lot of wrong things here, you kind of understand his side, and yet you kind of understand Wesley Snipes' side. And so it creates this really interesting debate and conversation in regards to fandom and the person that is being looked at and his relationship and codependence on the people that are looking at him, both positive and negatively. Just a really well done exploration of those things.
Aren't the fans what it's all about?
Shit. Tell you something, man. The fans are like women. When you're hitting, they love you. When you're not, they just as soon as spit on you as look at you.
And finally, I like the way that this movie takes its time introducing us to how mentally screwed up Robert De Niro's character actually is. I've talked about it briefly just in regards to his performance and how he slowly ratchets up his performance, but even the movie and the way that it unleashes little bits of information throughout the runtime to where you get those moments where it seems like he might be a little full of shit talking about the Rolling Stones and him used to know Mick Jagger, and he's talking to people on the radio about, you know, the way that he looks at sports, and he's trying to build this fandom and build this little relationship as the #1 fan of Bobby Rayburn. And then you get introduced to his ex-wife and his son and his co-workers, and you slowly see how these relationships just aren't really working out for him, and his personal life is slowly kind of collapsing in on itself. But it's not until later on in the movie that you realize fully that it's his own doing. It's not like life dealt him this wrong hand, or he's just a victim of circumstance, and that's why he gets unhinged. Like, you see this relationship with his son, and it seems like that's the human element. That's what grounds him. And yet he's giving up these client meetings so that he can take his son to opening day and teach him about baseball. And in the stadium, you quickly realize that it's never really about him taking his son or teaching his son or bonding with his son. It's about him bringing somebody that will listen to his bullshit and will look up at him as if he is this big grand authority on baseball, and will look up to him as if all these stories about him and Coop are just this golden information about baseball that nobody else is privy to. And his ex-wife, you never get any context about why she's scared as fuck about him and why she's trying to take the relationship with the son away, and slowly you start to realize why. And even his job, where it seems like he's just on a downside, a down slope of his sales. He's not hitting as much, just like with Bobby Rayburn. He's not hitting those hits, and so people don't like him as much. But you realize it's the way that he goes about it, it's his temperament, it's his personality, and he just disturbs people and doesn't need to be interacting with the public. And all the way through to the third act, where you start to get these reveals about this character Coop, his catcher that he was talking about the entire movie. This guy that taught him all this stuff about baseball. This person who is the basis for all of his baseball philosophy that he keeps telling his son and everybody else. And when you see the reality of what that relationship is, it's really creepy. It's really unnerving to find out the truth. And I just think the movie does a great subtle job at slowly introducing that stuff, not overdoing it, keeping it really grounded, and at the same time showing just how psychotic this character is in the smallest of ways. Now, moving on to the negatives, I will say, even though the movie is just short of 2 hours, and I think it has a nice pacing to it, and I don't exactly know how much more runtime we would need without hurting that pacing, I do feel like we are missing a little bit of character development, more so with Wesley Snipes, but even a little bit with the character of Gil, the Robert De Niro character. Mostly with Wesley Snipes, though, you just kind of see him as this sports figure. You see him through the eyes of Robert De Niro, and you get to know him most in the little segment in the end of the second act where they actually meet up and talk and discuss fandom and everything, and you get a little bit more insight into how Wesley Snipes feels about things, but you never really get to know him fully as a character or as a person. You never really get to feel that relationship that he has with his son. You never really get to truly sympathize with his struggles as this sports supposed to be protege and all the pressure that comes along with that. You just kind of see it through the eyes of Robert De Niro, and I feel like there's a bit of a missed opportunity there. And as far as Gil, Robert De Niro's character, I just wish we would have gotten a little bit more info on the inciting incident or what set him off to go down this path. And you never really get that. And some people will be satisfied with that. Some people like ambiguity. I myself like it sometimes. But this is a movie where I feel like by the end of it, there should have been something, some kind of an indication of what happened in his life to set him on this path. Was he going to be this baseball prodigy out of high school and injured himself and lost his career and then just fixated on somebody else's career? Like, it didn't even have to be a lot of information. I just wanted something to ground that character more into what can cause that type of behavior. Just makes it to where the ultimate growth that he has as a psycho, I just wanted that little footnote in there to bring it all together. They also made an editing choice in the third act to where while this whole situation is going down at the baseball stadium to where Wesley Snipes is supposed to get a home run to save his son's life, that they keep intercutting these shots of the FBI finding the location that his son is eventually going to be revealed to be at. And to me, that sucks a lot of the tension out of the third act. And there's all these little words and these little phrasings that Robert De Niro uses all the way up to the end to hint that his son is already dead or what has already happened. And it should leave you feeling really low and really scared and really dark about, oh my God, did he really just kill this kid? Did he go all the way? And I just never felt that. You know the kid's okay. And so it sucks a little bit of that impact and really a little bit of the victory by the final shot of Wesley Snipes embracing his son out of that third act because they did that. And the only other element here that, to be honest, just bugs me on a personal level is the couple of interactions that Gil has with his ex-wife and her new husband in regards to his relationship with his son. So immediately when we're introduced to these people, they don't like him, they don't trust him, they're very nervous about even letting their son go with him. And then immediately all of their fears are brought to fruition with him leaving his kid at the stadium to go do work. And ever since then, every single interaction that they have, I don't buy for a second, first of all, that the stepdad doesn't just cave Robert De Niro's head in, or they don't just call the cops. I mean, he literally breaks and enters into their house with them inside the house at some point, assaults his wife, and locks himself in the bedroom, and yet he doesn't get pulled away in handcuffs. He basically goes to assault people at a Little League game, and nobody arrests this guy. And so while I think that it, again, just slowly brings up the psycho quality in him and shows how dangerous his relationship with his son actually is for his son, there's a little strain of credibility there, and maybe it's just because I've been in those situations and I would handle them extremely differently. Hold the phone, one more. I sat down to edit this video and then immediately remembered one of the most glaring, hilarious issues with this film. If you remember back in the 80s and really prevalent in the 90s, they used to use a lot of stunt doubles, and they were not so good about editing around those stunt doubles to where you could see that the face or the hairdo or the body structure was just clearly not the actor that was being portrayed. This might be the worst example that I've ever seen, to where they have full-on close-up shots of people full face, walking, that look nothing like De Niro, that look nothing like Snipes. And it was hilarious to me. Like one scene especially to where De Niro runs off into the ocean to save Wesley Snipes' son. There's a lot of close-up shots of the guy under the water with the kid, above the water with the kid, Wesley Snipes' character in the ocean trying to find his kid. And every shot, it's almost like you're watching a different movie. You're like, those aren't De Niro and Snipes at all. Why are you showing so much of their face? There's even pitching shots to where it's supposed to be De Niro winding up a pitch and they kind of cut it off creatively where it's only half the dude's face, but it looks nothing like De Niro. And it's just like, what the fuck? You couldn't get De Niro to stand in 2 feet of water. You couldn't get De Niro to throw a pitch. You had to use a stunt double for that? What the fuck? But overall, guys, I have always found this to be a really underrated thriller. This is not like some 5-star gem that's gonna knock your socks off. You know, manage your expectations. But if you like De Niro, if you like Snipes, especially if you like baseball, this is a really good movie that I think talks about some things that are definitely worth discussing today more than ever. So if you haven't checked it out, please do yourself a favor. It's a pretty cool hidden gem in my book. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out this playlist over here for my 2023 new release reviews, and I'm also going to put my last little hidden gem review, Hollow Man, up here for you to check out. Check out Dave in the video description as well. And like, share, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. We're about to get really busy with summer movie season. So thank you guys for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.